guess what I started watching?
What?
King of the Hill.
Oh, did you?
Do you like King of the Hill? That's the question.
I do.
See, it took me a few episodes.
Oh my gosh.
But now when you go back and you watch it, you chuckle.
I just watched the sex ed one. And
with Peggy.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That is.
Or the not to be racist, but the Order of the Straight Arrow.
Oh, why is that racist?
Because they're making fun of Indian folklore.
That is true. That is a really funny one, too.
Waitamahamanu or whatever. Now that was probably racist. Sorry, everyone.
Josh, you got to stop starting all of our podcasts off with racial things, my friend.
We'll have to have another one of those. Please wait. Technical difficulties.
Seriously.
I'm not seeing 007 on here.
I swear that some of them are on there. I know that...
Spectre is.
Ooh.
And then they have The Road to a Million, which is that one with... I can't remember his name.
Peter Sellers?
No, it's the...
Peter Sellers was in the James Bond show. Did you know that?
Was he really?
He absolutely was.
Which one was he in?
So Peter Sellers was in the spoof of James Bond that was actually played a little bit more straight than anything, but it's Casino Royale.
Oh, with Sean Connery?
No.
Oh,
so he played in the original Casino Royale.
So he played in the 1967 version of Casino Royale.
Isn't that considered the worst one ever?
It is a very, very bad one. But yeah, he was the mastermind, the Evelyn Tremble or whatever it is.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, I couldn't picture him as the guy that played Bond.
No, David Niven was the original.
He found out very quick.
But it was not a good one.
See, I still love the classic ones with Sean Connery. I love watching those ones.
I started rereading some of them. They're okay until you get to, I think it was, what was the one? Speaking of racism, there was one where they go to New Orleans, and it was like I started reading, and I was like, "Whoa, this is super racist!" Like, so.
See, and here's the thing: I've never seen any of the originals. I'm a Pierce Brosnan Bond.
Pierce Brosnan.
Brosnan, whatever.
I am Patrick Brosnan, James Bond fan.
See,
so you've never seen any of like the original with Sean Connery or Roger Moore?
Nope.
See,
man.
I haven't watched the Roger Moore ones, which is what I want to do. I've only seen snippets.
Roger Moore's are super campy. I mean, they are over the top, super innuendo filled. He's kind of the untouchable Bond.
Well, I mean, I can't say half the name of the girls on this podcast because of their names. So.
Seriously, Roger Moore. So Roger Moore's are like super like 70s campy, and then you had
Timothy Dalton.
Yes,
is that what it was?
And his were actually like super good.
See, and I like Timothy Dalton.
When I read the books, that's who I imagine in my head as like the Timothy Dalton, because Timothy Dalton played him as like cold.
Do you know what's funny?
A really cold, dark.
Do you know the only movie I've watched Timothy Dalton in? Looney Tunes one.
I still watch that one.
Timothy Dalton it's weird. He went from like super serious roles, and then all of a sudden he's like in all of like the like comedies now.
Hey, you know what?
Good for him.
I would totally, if you're a serious actor for a moment, you turn comedies. What's worse is when someone goes from comedy to serious and you're like, I just can't picture them.
Yes.
Like Peele. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Like
Jordan.
If Jordan Peele?
If Will Ferrell ever did a serious role, I don't think I could believe him.
He's done a couple serious roles.
See? And I don't think I believe
Stranger
him.
Than Fiction is... it's still kind of funny, but it's played more serious, I think.
See, do you know who else I think has done it really well, even though he throws comedy into serious roles? Robin Williams.
Well, Robin Williams was just a fantastic
Robin Williams.
actor anyway. Like Adam Sandler,
Williams.
whenever he tries to do a serious one, I'm like, I have a hard time with this.
Yeah, his Uncut Gems and Spanglish, they were okay, but they're definitely not my favorite.
Do you know who I think is also a really good actor? I know I've watched a few of the things he's been in, but Parks and Rec's guy,
Ron Swanson, the guy.
Yeah,
the guy.
He could play comedy, but then he could be a really good bad guy.
There was one. It wasn't a bad guy. It was like this weird like futuristic one that he was in, where like they build a machine that like can like replicate the entire history of the world. It was like super odd, and he plays like this recluse multi-billionaire that's just trying to like find his daughter who died. It is a wild ride, and you get to the end of it, I was just like, what the heck was this all about?
See, and I watched a show called Umbrella Academy.
Oh yeah,
and he was a crazy like person who believed that there was a multiverse, but then he ended up being like this horrible like cult leader that like killed everyone.
What season was he in?
The very last one.
Oh, see, I only watched the
one.
first season with Julie. She watched, I think, the rest of them. I haven't.
They were fun. I like the Umbrella Academy. And guess what? That's what we're talking about today.
Umbrella Academy?
No. Welcome to Twaddling Along Podcast, everyone. Josh was about to say a bad word. Did you guys hear that?
No, I was about to give people a sneak preview of who we're talking about today.
I'm your host, Danny McBride. Put my last name in there again. Here with my co-hosts and brothers, Joshua David McBride.
And here's the funny thing: you said Danny this time, not Dan.
I've been kind of switching over to the Danny. I like the Danny.
I'm Joshy McBride.
Joshy. And
I'm Jacob McBride.
Jacob.
Not to be confused with Jake McBride,
Or Jacobus.
who is the same person.
Yeah, I've decided to move away from the Dan.
Really?
Yeah. I'm going back to Danny. I like it.
Is it because you're growing out your hair?
Probably. I think it's probably it's
Danny.
all about a
Dan
midlife
is not-
crisis.
Danny's
That's coming
going
out.
all hippies, like,
I am-
man, I'm
Danny.
It's 100%. In like I guess in my professional life, I'll probably still go by Dan, but like everywhere else, I've been introducing myself as Danny again, which is kind of weird.
And I always have people come up and they're like, so is it Jacob or Jake? And I always say, like, I don't really have a preference. Jake rolls off the tongue easier. But like for people, it's like you don't have a preference, and I'm like, I really don't have a preference.
Some people do. Like some people were raised with like a parent that is like, your name is this. It is the proper. You are Benjamin, and if you call yourself Ben, you'll be beaten with a switch.
You mean our great grandmother?
Yeah. Old Elizabeth Harker Minson. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
she did not like.
See, and where I work, it's very proper. Usually, most of the time, I get called Brother McBride, but
Where you work, Josh, you would be J. David McBride.
that's true. Yep.
Not that just gave away exactly where you work.
So now you're going to have to be extra cautious.
I have the most Hebrew name there is, except for my last name.
Joshua David McBride.
It's the name of the Messiah, and then the name of the lineage of the Messiah.
Oh, look at you, me. I'm named after some dude with, lions.
So, and some dude that went in and just killed a bunch of people because they were very mean to his sister.
That's true. Dan was not a very nice person.
Oh, I was like,
Come on, brush up on your Bible there, boy.
I didn't think.
I'm the father of a nation, so or not just one nation, 12 nations.
Yeah, but you haven't been renamed Israel yet.
Oh, that's right.
And with that, it comes to what we're actually talking about today. We're either talking about the biblical prophecies and where names come from, or
Really random movies we've been
random
watching
movies.
a little bit.
No, we're actually going to be talking about a Civil War general.
Yeah, and this is a perfect segue because where did he get his name from?
Mr. Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall.
Stonewall Jackson. No, his real name being Thomas Jonathan. Thomas. Speaking of going back in time, there's
Sorry.
my childhood
Thomas
lisp
Van
coming out.
Dyke.
I don't want to make
Thomas
fun of my dear
Jonathan
friend Mike
Jackson.
Tyson, but
It's Mike Tyson.
Stonewall Jackson.
We're going to be talking about Jonathan Stonewall Jackson.
I could have beat him in the ring.
Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Confederate general. So he was on the South End. They lost. Everybody know that?
They did, and they probably lost in part because of what happened to Stonewall Jackson.
A lot of people have actually said something like that Stonewall Jackson's death, spoiler alert,
Was the turning point.
was kind of the turning point. However, I've been reading, there's actually a really interesting book called Rebel Yell, which I've been reading. And he kind of makes it like, yeah, he was, like his death was important, but maybe it was more just the war probably would have been longer, not necessarily that the South
Well,
would have won.
you had Grant come in, who was a good general, and then you had crazy
Sherman.
Sherman who was just
Total
burning up
war.
everything.
What was it?
So-
Tuckamana? What's his name? Tecumseh Sherman.
Tecumseh Sherman.
Let's split the South in half.
That's
and burn
another
everything.
person we're gonna have to go over because he
William
was
Tecumseh.
crazy.
Yeah, his whole thought was, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start in Georgia and burn
And
everything.
I'll move up north, and then when I get home, I'll have lunch.
Seriously.
So Stonewall Jackson, a little background on Mr. Stonewall Jackson. Born January 21st, 1824 in Clark. I did it again.
January 21st.
It's so bad, guys.
Danny, are you tired?
I am exhausted.
I'm sorry.
Born January 21st, 1824 in Clarksburg, Virginia, which is actually now West Virginia.
Oh,
So he's a hill person. Yeah.
we
It
talked about them.
explains everything.
We did.
I wonder if he did the marriage ritual.
That's true. Did his wife go and find a pig? That's
Yes.
what we need to know.
Which pig?
The one that didn't talk.
Seriously. We're going to get into his kind of
I know we're
craziness.
presenting a whole lot of spoilers, so
Spoiler alert. But he was born in what is now West Virginia. He went to a United States Military Academy, West Point. Guys, this is bad. It's all going downhill.
you got it, Danny. I believe in you.
He joined the Confederate Army after the secession of Virginia, and he distinguished himself commanding a brigade at the First Battle of Bull Run. Those are just kind of those are the highlights of maybe what we're going to be talking about. But we're also going to be talking about the fact that he was a weirdo. He had a lot of like really interesting kind of character traits that probably could be associated with maybe that he had like a high functioning form of autism. Not saying that people with autism are weird,
I'm autistic.
but
I'm just kidding.
Josh is everything.
How can we stop for a second?
Sure.
I'm just reading where his parents come from.
Isn't that crazy?
They fell in love on a prison ship because both of them were prisoners.
Oh, I didn't read this.
Yeah.
So his dad was an Irish Protestant from Ireland. While living in England, he was convicted of the capital crime of larceny for stealing 170 pounds. 7 years of penal transportation was his sentence.
Just sounds lovely.
Elizabeth, a strong blonde woman, almost 6 feet tall. This is his mother. Born in London, was convicted of felony larceny in unrelated case for stealing 19 pieces of silver, jewelry, and fine lace, and received a similar sentence. They both were transported on the merchant ship Litchfield, which departed London in 1749. John and Elizabeth met on board and were in love by the time the ship arrived in Maryland.
The crazy thing is John was also a veteran of the American Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
He was in the Battle of Kings Mountain and actually finished his service as a captain. So he was actually an officer at the very tail end of
No, which
Revolutionary
side
War.
was he on?
He was on the
American side.
Patriots.
He was probably dang angry about being on the stupid penal ship for.
That's exactly what he's. He's like, number one, how dare you call it a penal ship? Because that sounds wrong.
And what you don't know is Elizabeth also served. She put on a wig, and she was known as George Washington.
Oh, is that who George Washington was?
Just kidding.
Oh, okay.
That explains everything.
No, she converted their home to a haven known as Jackson's Fort for refugees from Native American attacks.
And they had lots of kids.
Yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of kids, which, I mean, they were good. They weren't. I'm sorry. I was going to say they were good Irish Catholics. They're not.
No.
They're Irish Protestants.
So they were North Irish.
They were North Ireland, Londonderry County. So very, very
So
North
yeah,
Irish.
I can tell why he's nuts.
Kind of.
His parents were prisoners who fought for their independence and then created a weird home with millions of kids. Kids.
You too. I'm concerned.
Millions of kids.
If I start talking, I think there's something in the
I
air.
know. Is there gas? Gas! Gas! Name the movie.
Oh, and I have to make one quick correction. We've been talking about his
Red
grandparents, not his parents.
Oh, I wonder. I was
Yeah, it was his
wondering why it was in the 1750s.
I was about to be like, what? Did they were like 60 when they had him? Like, what happened?
No, sorry. They were his grandparents, and his parents weren't actually born until near the turn of the 17th century in 1798 and 1790.
Well, it still explains a lot.
Say, because Stonewall Jackson, when he died, Danny,
It was my age.
he was 39.
He was 39 years old.
Dude.
We'll get to how he died because I kind of think it's funny because it's
sad.
It's something I don't know. It is sad, but at the same time, it's one of those stories where at the end it's like, oh, we're all just paranoid.
I mean,
Do you realize that his death created a bullet forensics?
Really?
It was the first time that they used a bullet as forensics and found out who killed him.
oh crap, we shot him.
Another spoiler. You can probably go with it. So let's talk about how Stonewall Jackson came to be.
Well,
His mom
by the way,
and his dad.
when two West Virginians love each other very much,
Who are brother and sister.
they go into a pigsty. Oh,
I'm glad. Do you guys know anyone from West Virginia?
I don't.
Bless them.
You know something? When we do meet them, it's not going to be a good thing.
I had a friend from West Virginia in school, and he just kept saying, "I'm so glad I'm going to get out of here because I can go buy like 5 acres for like $200." I'm like,
In
good
West
for you.
Virginia.
Dang it, man.
So he's a bizarre guy. Number one, he came in impoverished to the West Point when he was actually when he was trying to become a soldier. Like he was actually like looked down upon because he was from Virginia, from these people, worked in a mill, didn't have a whole lot of money, and when he got to West Point in 1842, he was accepted, but he was at the very bottom of his class. Which, if anybody doesn't understand that, in West Point, they have like graduating classes, and they are ranked based on their standing in the class. That's still something that is even happening all the way until nowadays. But he was a determined guy. He became a very hardworking candidate and rose from number 59 all the way to the 17th. Graduated in 1846. So,
Which was at the beginning of the
Mexican-American War.
Yes.
So he was a second lieutenant in the Company K in the 1st U.S. Artillery Regiment of the Mexican-American War. Do you guys know who he was under?
Friggin' George Washington.
No.
I'm just kidding.
George Washington had been gone for
I don't
a while.
know. Who was he?
Zachary Taylor, the 12th President of the United States.
Senior Zachary Taylor. Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yep, he was underneath them, and he was in a couple different battles, and he was assigned to New York and assigned to Florida, and he was all over the place. What's funny is, even though like he's considered to have like a super strong character in the later Civil War, he wasn't all that popular in the Mexican-American War. As a matter of fact, like a lot of people were like, this guy is just kind of a nut. He was known for giving bad orders. So like soldiers would come to him and he'd be like, yeah, go over there. And then they would, get shot by the Mexicans. So wasn't exactly known for his outstanding military things in the Mexican.
I have an idea. Let's ask him, and whatever he says, we'll go do the opposite.
Later, he got transferred in 1851 to the Virginia Military Institute.
This is also kind of funny.
So
He became a professor.
He did. And the kind of professor that he was would have driven me nuts.
Hey, but have you guys seen the picture of him when he was a professor?
I've seen the drawing.
His chops rock.
He did have some killer chops.
He was a very handsome man.
He was handsome, but he was a very disliked teacher.
He just memorized his lectures the day before, and then he would just read them. And then a person would raise his hand and be like, wait, I have a question. And they'd ask the question, and then he would just go back a few sentences, repeat what he just said, and then keep going.
And then he would, and if the student asked again, he would start to get angry to a point where he would actually make disciplinary action based if a student didn't understand his lecture.
So what did they do? They threw bricks at him.
They did, and called him the Tom Fool.
Oh, can you imagine? Because I had the experience. I've had the experience of doing both online school and in course school. There's some professors that would have just been fun to just start throwing stuff at. Because I had a professor like this. He just memorized and he would just read through it. And then he had random moments where he would turn and go, and they would do what?
And you're like,
and then he would stop, and you're like, we haven't talked about this yet. So it's like, well, did they do this? No, he did what? And he would sit there for 5 minutes, and finally someone's like, did they do this? Close. And then he would go on and not even tell us what he was trying to answer at the beginning. So I can totally understand why you want to throw a brick at him.
I had a Russian anthropologist teacher in a community college class who didn't look at the students. She had prepared a slideshow at the beginning. She would stare at the slideshow, and we're not talking when we're talking about the PowerPoint presentation, the presenter view. Not the actual presentation, but the ones that have the notes.
Yes.
That's the one that she would show on the board. She would read the notes. She would read the notes verbatim, and people you couldn't ask her a question because I do not think that she once looked at any of us. She didn't turn around to look at us one time.
My wife had a similar person, but
it could have been the same person actually.
No, this was a guy who was teaching math, just fresh out of college, and he wanted the kids to solve the problem that was on the board, and all of them were getting the same answers. And he's like, no, it's not. And started filling it out and couldn't figure it out.
So he got to the end and he's like,
and so they took the midterm and all of his class failed. The highest percentage was 30%. And he was like, why is everyone failing? Well, they gave him the same test, and he ended up being fired because he didn't pass his own test.
Oh, really?
Oh, my gosh.
So hopefully they got credit for that class without...
Kylie dropped out. Everyone dropped out.
How could you not? Thank goodness that most of the time, if that's the case, you're graded on a curve. I love the curve grading.
The professor that didn't do it.
That's true. They were always my favorite. The one that would say something, which I think old Mr. Stonewall Jackson might have been one of those that would say, the only perfect person is God. And so there will be no A's given in this class.
Oh, yes.
Do you guys ever have any of those?
He was very religious.
Yep. I had a history professor who his whole purpose for his class was to confuse the crap out of us. And this is how he would do it. He'd be like, okay, we're going to start with the Boston Massacre. And he's like, so what happened? And we'd be like, someone shot first. We're not sure who. And he's like, prove it. And we'd be like, I wasn't there.
Do you want a textbook
we'd be like,
article
okay,
here,
so the British shot first. And he'd be like, well, not to be the devil's advocate, but what if the black guy shot first? And he would just be the devil's advocate on everything because he wanted us to have a neutral view of history.
I absolutely love whenever someone starts saying, not to be the devil's advocate. And you're like, yes, you want to be the devil's advocate. Stop saying that.
Yep.
Though I love being a devil's advocate. There are some people that are just contrarian. And those people that are contrarian, they're good people too. Me.
I can get started on other things too.
Can too.
Do you know what's really funny, though, about Stonewall Jackson? Is he was a horrible teacher, but he was a wonderful pastor.
Well, you say that. He was a super religious guy, beyond religion. And he was actually one of the very few in the South that was actually concerned about the black community. The former slaves. He would go out of his way to teach these former slaves and everything like that. But... there in this book that I'm reading, it brings up the point that he was also a rigid Christian. So he redemption wasn't really in the cards for old Stonewall. His was more fire, damnation, hell. And
I mean, that was the area at the time. Everyone was, if you look at a woman, you're dead.
Yeah, seriously. It's funny, but speaking of slavery, so there is no reports or any writing whatsoever that he had a strong view on slavery. He had slaves. He had several of them.
Mm-hmm.
However, most of them were either given to him or like literally left at his door. He never actually went out of his way to buy a slave. What's fascinating is he also was not like anti-slavery at all. Like given his very religious upbringing and his religiosity in later life, he had like zero qualms about slavery.
Yeah, he was able to justify it through what he felt the Bible talked about.
Yeah, he never apologized. He actually believed that you could actually have a higher moral superiority as a good slave owner than a abolitionist.
Really?
Yeah. He actually, I mean, there in his writings, he literally said that an abolitionist who professes themselves to be a Christian does not believe in the Christ that I believe in. It's pretty crazy.
Oh, they were really trying hard to justify their behavior.
Oh, they really were. Like 100%. Like it's fascinating to me, you know. There's this idea of, especially in the Civil War, of what they call what is it called? The lost cause. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of the rewriting of what the Civil War was all about. You know, and it still kind of crops up every once in a while where you'll have people that have strong beliefs that, well, the Civil War wasn't about slavery. It was about, you know, statehood, and it was about the idea that men could make their own decisions for themselves and not be told by the federal government. And it's like, okay, sure. But what were the ideas that they were trying to not be told about? It was slavery.
I had that in almost every area of my schooling. Some people would always come over and say it wasn't really about slavery, and it's like, I don't think that's
yeah, it's pseudo historical, and there is some thought that, okay, when you kind of go about it, the argument was, no, we get to decide for ourselves. You know? But what are they deciding for themselves?
Slavery.
Whether slavery is going to continue.
whether it's okay to take a human being and put them through hell
and make them a 2/5 or a 3/5.
And Stonewall Jackson is one of those that kind of fits the bill of what is called the lost cause of the Confederacy, in that he was made kind of this, you know, people took stories like I just talked about him never having slaves and saying, see, he wasn't fighting for slavery. He wasn't fighting for this. Mm-hmm. He was fighting for his homeland. He was fighting for the South. He was doing this, that, and the other. But like you get into his actual like writings, and no, the guy had feelings about slavery. It wasn't professed, you know. So anyways,
we can move on to he was a hypochondriac.
Tell us about the hypochondria, Jake.
So he had some different things. My favorite, and you guys could probably share some of the other stuff, but this is the one I focused on. He believed that half of his body didn't weigh the same as his other half, or was different than the other half. And so he would randomly just have his like arm raised up because he felt like it had to do something, or it was going to do something for him. They now say it was probably like he was having like gastrointestinal issues. And that was his way of justifying it, or what he thought was going on. But yeah, like he was just have his arm up and just walk.
Can you imagine if he was in class and he was doing that? Yes, Thomas. Don't worry, just gassy.
Well, but he didn't believe that it was gassy. Oh. He also wouldn't eat pepper because he believed it would increase the weight of his left leg, not his right leg, just his left leg.
His left leg. There was something else that was major about his hypochondria, and I can't remember.
He wouldn't let his back touch the back of a chair.
Oh, yes. And also he believed that standing was the best thing for his posture, and so he would just stand all the time.
You know, the more I learn about this guy, I feel like he's nuts.
So looking through the view of modern day, like he would be what I would consider to be like, and it's gone out of term now, but an Asperger's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like someone who is suffering from Asperger's, or who has Asperger's condition, you know, very high functioning autism, because like a lot of these unusual quirks like go right in line with someone who is like hyper focused in the autism spectrum.
Well, and he hated talking to people. And so
Hated it.
he loved being quiet, and he was super awkward in social
Public places,
gatherings.
yeah.
And he didn't dress well.
And see, and you think that's a perfect general because he doesn't care about anybody's opinion or like socially can't communicate. It's just, okay, do this. And then if people try to argue, it's like, I don't care about you. Like, whatever.
Well, it's just in doing research on this, I came across the one comedian, I can't remember his name, that had talked about it. Like that he just, some of his behavior, even on the battlefield, like how he got his name was he was just standing rigid on top of a hill.
Yeah.
During a big battle and all of his like troops are dying or his comrades are dying and he's just standing rigid. And like Stonewall Jackson, he's probably just like, nope, I'm obeying orders. I was told to stand here.
Yeah, I think that was Shane Gillis.
Oh,
brought
see,
it up.
Shane Gillis?
Yep.
And he was talking a little bit about that. But like I actually read, so they've actually done a couple of different like full articles because of that. So the author of the book that I'm reading right now, the Rebel Yell, actually did a response and said,
you're reading the Rebel Yell? Okay.
and said, "Oh yeah, like probably like he was a weirdo. He believed that all maladies came from his liver, and so he was known for like if he got a sore throat, he would rub his liver continuously until the sore throat went away."
Oh,
Do you know
That'd be
what's
quite the
really,
thing.
really interesting? So he was a Confederate, right?
He was.
Do you realize that he wore a Union uniform all the way until 2 years into the war?
did he really?
Because it
So it was-
fit him well.
It was blue?
Yep. He was blue and was not issued with a gray Confederate uniform until 1862.
Well,
So can you imagine this general standing on top of a hill? His comrades are being shot. The reason he wasn't shot is because everyone's like, what is that Union soldier doing up there standing on top of this hill? Well, it turns out he was actually a Confederate general.
he's Stonewall Jackson.
There's Stonewall up there. Well, what's crazy is that like, and this is another reason that he was also probably an incredibly effective general, is he was not known for mercy.
No.
Like there was zero mercy. It was these are the laws that are stated in it, and then my judgment will be based off of those laws, period, end of story. And so he was super brutal. But what that did is it made it so like his soldiers had pretty darn clear expectations from him because they knew that he was still just. I mean, he was a just guy. Like, and he was the first to be like, oh, you did well. But they were very, very regimented compared to the rest of the South, which was a little bit more wishy-washy, including like Lee's soldiers. So it's kind of an interesting stuff. So
Yep.
he didn't laugh. like Henry Douglas, who is the author, said that like he was reserved and awkward in company. He didn't really talk, even when it came to his military plans, and it used to drive people mad, including Lee himself. Like Lee would like write that I don't know what Stonewall Jackson's doing. He wouldn't share his plans with anybody. So like all the generals come together and they're like, okay, how are we going to keep the South safe? And there would Stonewall Jackson be just like backward in the corner, probably twiddling his thumbs or like raising his hand high up in the air or something. And they'd be like, yes, Stonewall, what do you have to say? And he'd be like, nothing. No one gets to know my plans, including like the people underneath him. So his like colonels would come to him or his lieutenants would come to him and be like, okay, so what do you want us to do? And he would be like, you'll know when I tell you. And it's like, there's no forefront in planning. You got to give us some like,
I think he just
To
came
and
up
fro.
with stuff on the spot.
probably.
Well, he was very effective because,
He was
man,
incredibly
he,
effective.
So I just want to go back to him being named Stonewall. So General B, so not General Lee, but General B Jr. was overwhelmed, and he rode up to Jackson in despair, exclaiming, "They are beating us back." So he was losing ground. Jackson, on top of the hill, said, "Then we give them the bayonet." As he rode back to his command, B exhorted the troops and said, "There is Jackson standing like a stone wall." Well, he had one of these episodes where he was having pains or whatever, so he lifted his hand in the air and just standing on top.
Standing. People are like, "Oh, Stonewall! Look at him! He's waving to us all."
So literally, the person said, "Look, Jackson is standing like a stone wall." Well, all of them believed that that was a gesture of religious thing, and they thought he was praying on top of the hill that God would protect him.
And then the reality is like, my left side feels a little off. Got to raise my hand in the air.
And here's another funny thing: his hand during that time, as he was holding it up in the air, was struck with a piece of shrapnel, and he lost his middle finger because he refused medical advice because he didn't want to put his arm down. So he lost his middle finger. So now it's like E.T. flow home, kind of live long and prosper with his middle finger gone.
So I read that story. There's some historical things that say that's like they call it pseudo historical. Like
urban legend kind
they
of.
made it seem like the General B was like, oh, look how wonderful it is. When in reality, a lot of people think that General B
exasperation.
was pissed.
I bet.
He was like, this idiot up on the hill.
He's not doing anything.
He's
and we're
not doing
dying.
anything. He's just, we're throwing our men one after another. They're dying. And that his exhort of, look at that stone wall on the hill wasn't actually like a good thing. It was,
sorry.
Look at this idiot up on the hill who's standing like a stone statue.
It's like staring at a brick wall.
But I mean, it became legend. I mean, it was like something that throughout the
spread-
South was like, hey, this is what it
Spreads
is.
through the South. He became a folk hero literally overnight in the entire Confederacy.
Just because of that,
Like-
that potential name.
Like to a point where like people were naming their children after him. I
Yeah.
mean, he was like a huge
Yeah,
folk hero.
the North feared him.
and the funny thing is, he didn't give a rat's butt.
Didn't care whatsoever.
Later on in his career, he was known for the oxymoronic nickname of being the commander of the foot cavalry because he would force his units to run to different locations instead of march. And so they'd get there so quickly.
Well, yeah, and they were doing like 20 miles a day
Yep.
type of stuff.
But he was a brilliant general. He defeated pretty much every general of the Union Army up until Lee.
Up until Lee, you mean Grant?
Grant. Sorry, Grant.
Yeah.
He finally came. He's like, you know what, Lee, I'm tired of this. I'm taking you down.
And once again, I mean, he was young. He was my age.
He wasn't that old.
He was in his mid 30s, and he was that successful of a person.
You know what?
So.
As we were talking about a little earlier, Danny, maybe he was having like a quarter life or like third life crisis.
It was a midlife crisis, 100%.
and he was just
But I mean, he was Lee's pretty much right hand towards the time when
100%.
Yeah.
In so much that, like, on his deathbed, once again, we're jumping forward a little bit, but Lee actually wrote a letter that specifically said, I wish it were me.
yeah.
I wish it were me that was in that bed. And he was 100% sincere. This wasn't like Lee just being like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened. This was Lee being like, oh, crap. Like, I've lost a figure piece in my puzzle.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have someone else to fill this space right now.
yeah. And just after that is when George Pickett, I think that's his name, was basically Lee's next man.
Yeah.
And he was the one that basically failed miserably at Gettysburg because he kept charging up this hill and getting completely massacred.
Well, and that's what they say is they say, if, and once again, the war continued for 2 years after Jackson died. It wasn't like Stonewall Jackson died and the North was like, woohoo, more power to us, we win. Like, there was still quite a bit of time in the war that happened afterward, but Gettysburg was a really big shift. And a lot of people think that if Stonewall Jackson was a part, Gettysburg would have actually been more brutal and more horrendous, and there was a chance that the North might not have come out victorious because Stonewall was known for his flankings, where he would send all of his people out. They were so regimented, they would stay in place, and then he would flank around the enemy. And Pickett was just headlong right into that hill again and again and again and again. And the North, after a while, was just like, oh yeah, okay.
This is easy, just easy
We're just
pickings.
Yep. In fact, one of the battles that he's most famous for was the Battle of Antietam, which is known as the bloodiest day in the Civil War, single most day. And the reason that is because Jackson's men bore the brunt of the initial attacks, and they just held their position in the middle and they were completely surrounded by the Union Army.
Wasn't it by like 3 different like
Yep.
units
So
in the army?
McClellan had like almost 3 times the amount of men, but somehow Jackson was able to break the surrounding, and it ended up completely just decimating the Union Army.
Just decimating with his arm up.
With his arm up.
And you can see though why not only for the South that was like, oh, he is like the folk hero, but for the North it was like, okay, this is scary.
This weirdo is this
like,
weirdo with his hand up that keeps punching himself in the liver is winning.
Yeah, and here's what's even worse or weirder. So the Battle of Fredericksburg, which was another huge battle, he held off the Union flank, and then he went back to his tent, found out that his daughter was born, and celebrated.
Yay.
Well, after he had just killed thousands of people.
And this kind of goes back to his potential for his autism, is that they do say that like when battles were done, I mean, when a battle was done back in those days, it was thousands upon thousands of bodies, and the smell of decay and death was overwhelming. And for most people, it was this grim, horrible, terrible time. But for old Stonewall Jackson, he would go out and be like, oh, God's been good to us today. And like, there's just bodies strewn all about him.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, this is great. More power to us.
Here's another thing that supports our theory that he could have been autistic. After the Battle of Fredericksburg, Lee's dashing and well-dressed cavalry commander presented Jackson a fine general's frock coat that he had ordered one of the best tailors in Richmond, Virginia. Jackson's previous coat was threadbare and colorless from the exposure to the elements. Its buttons had been removed by admiring ladies. Jackson asked his staff to thank Stuart, saying that although the coat was too handsome for him, he would cherish it as a souvenir. His staff insisted that he wear it to dinner, which caused scores of soldiers to rush to see him in uncharacteristic garb. Jackson was so embarrassed with the attention that he did not wear the new uniform for the rest of his life.
Yep. I honestly think, and maybe it's terribly unfair for us to call him weird, because these probably really were traits of someone who was a brilliant mind of his day.
Yeah.
Suffering from autism, and not like, and a very high functioning probably. And this just goes to show you of how, things have changed over time, because I think that nowadays anybody would exhibiting these signs, that's immediately what we would assign him to. And probably because of that assigning, they wouldn't be able to succeed. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm talking about? No. And yet at this time, having these traits, he was still able to not only succeed, but become revered to a point of like,
I just like that his buttons got ripped off by admiring women.
Yeah, he couldn't button it up, so he would like safety pin it shut.
We love you so much. Thanks for killing so many people here. Rips.
Here's the other thing that I think. I wonder if too his disassociation with everything was a coping mechanism of the things he actually did see.
Yeah, it could be.
I mean, they saw horrible things.
Yeah,
pretty
Civil War was,
things.
compared to, earlier wars, it was the worst war and worst injuries they had ever seen.
Sure.
Up until World War I, when nuclear, or not nuclear, but chemical weapons were used.
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, you were lining up.
Yeah,
and just shooting at each other. It was the old warfare type of thing.
Yep, it was traditional warfare.
Which was respectable. And all that.
Which is so funny because Andrew Jackson, several years before in 1812, was using guerrilla warfare in Louisiana.
Well, yeah. So the South was using a lot of, and that's actually one of the things, that Stonewall Jackson was really good at, is he used the land. Yeah. I mean, he had this unbelievable mind that could anticipate movements of soldiers based off of his almost meticulous planning of like every ounce of the battlefield. Like people said that he had, this, it was almost like perfect memory, perfect placement of things. Like he could tell you where a tree was from reading a map, And so because of that, he was able to he could use kind of more of the guerrilla side or the outflanking where, you've got a lot of these northern generals who were just not used to it. They're not used to that kind of fighting.
Can you imagine having the draw maps back in the day?
Oh,
I just look at that and it's just like like in our era, like that's just you don't see that because we have the satellites. I mean, so if you do draw a map, you're using that as but like looking out and be like, okay, there's a tree over there. Oh, that hill is just slightly bigger, so we got to be aware of that. And then
cartographers, and they were really good at it.
Oh yeah,
like really, 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 like two very precise.
Well, when you look at Lewis and Clark's map, what they were able to do just by exploring, it's just mind-boggling to me because I would have been like, there might be a river here. Maybe.
I would have stopped at Boston and just made up things. There's dragons out there. I know it.
Do you know that's actually where some of the first Bigfoot, because they claimed that Lewis and Clark did claim that there was a beast.
Oh, we'll have to get into this because I think this is a really fascinating one, but later. But I do want to just say one thing. There was strong belief to a point of almost certainty by Thomas Jefferson himself that when Lewis and Clark started off and to doing things, they would find mastodons.
Oh, really?
They would find mammoths. Yeah. He 100% believed and prepared them. And in his writing said, when you find them, document them so that we know and we have that in our back pocket, which is crazy to think of.
Yeah.
And to that notion, there are hieroglyphs in South America that shows humans riding dinosaur-esque animals.
We're getting into the paranormal a whole week early, people.
Aliens.
But what time do we got, Dan?
So we've got about 10 minutes. I
so
think
we
it's
need
maybe
to move
time.
in to his death.
We've been talking about it, but now it's official.
Fooled around long enough. Josh, how did old Stonewall Jackson die? It was with a lot of honor, right, in the battlefield?
Yep, absolutely. He was riding back from battle after a hard day, and he was riding back. It was late at night, and he was riding, and all of a sudden the camp said, "Halt! Who goes there?" And Jackson said, "It's me, Jackson." And one of his majors said, "It's a damned Yankee trick." Fire, and completely unleashed everything they had.
like just
Artillery
absolutely
rounds.
murdered all of not just Jackson, but like Jackson's
horses, his men,
a lot of the top brass of this. A guy by the name of John D. Barry, poor John D. Barry, on his tombstone. It actually talks about that he lived in remorse for the killing of Stonewall Jackson.
Well, here's Jackson, a general.
Yeah.
Not telling his guys, hey, I'm going to go and see if I can kind of pinpoint where the Union Army is in the woods.
Because he didn't tell anybody anything.
Yeah, no, he goes off by himself. So, I mean, we've talked about it. When there's a large thing crashing through the forest, I'd probably shoot at it too.
See, and that's the thing, as they said, is they unloaded all their military artillery rounds and several rounds of guns, in the sense that Jackson was actually hit 3 times. And then in an attempt to save his life, they put him on a gurney. His 2 people carrying him were shot and killed. And so he was dropped out of his whatever thing that I did, stretcher. So here he is being carried. He's been shot 3 times. All of a sudden, his 2 medical staff get shot, and he just rolls off the stretcher.
And he just because of him not telling anybody. And this is something that I wanted to bring up, is that there is a lot of historians out there that say what we consider to be Jackson being a great general, the best thing that could have happened for Jackson's legacy was that he died.
Yeah.
Because given just a little while longer, the Union was getting smart.
Yeah.
The Union had a huge spy ring, which I'm going to tell you one day we're going to talk about the Civil War spies, because it is...
And the Secret Service?
It is unbelievable. I had no idea that this existed, but it was the coolest spy rings in the Civil War.
They make the KGB look like infants.
It really was. It was really this cool thing, but the Unions had kind of figured Stonewall Jackson out, and so it was just a matter of time before Stonewall Jackson started losing.
Well, and the North was, their industry was greatly enhancing. I
Oh,
mean, the
yeah,
ironclads, which used to be mostly a South thing, suddenly were getting destroyed because they invented the new ironclad that actually had a turret that moved.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, so there was, it was, again, I mean, it's one of those things where it's, you have that going on, and then you have Grant, who, you know, was pretty stinking good, and then you have Sherman, who's just burning up the rest of the South down below. I mean,
No,
I don't know if Stonewall Jackson would have been able to, he would have been like,
He would have stand on top of a hill with his hand up in the air.
now
and
here's
Sherman would have been throwing fire at him.
here's what's super interesting.
Total
So
war. The word of the day is total war.
seriously. So here it is. Jackson's been shot. They amputate his arm, but he doesn't die from his gunshot wounds.
Pneumonia.
He
Or not
dies.
pneumonia.
Yep.
Oh, he's in pneumonia?
He dies from pneumonia because he was left out for so long during the battle that he got cold.
Well, not only that, the guy who they went and actually did surgery in his house, he was a guy by the name of Thomas Chandler.
Yeah.
Thomas Chandler said, "Come into my home where we've got warmth, we've got fire, we can treat you here." Jackson, who
in your office building, dang it.
that's exactly what he did. He's like, "I do not want to go into your home. Please put me in your office building," which was damp. It was not fire. I mean, it was not a warm place because people didn't have to spend overnights there. And he died by his own kind of not wanting to be around people, which is, let's be honest, a very autistic thing that, you know, I don't want to be around people even if I'm dying.
Yeah.
So-
Well, I mean, it's just, what a way to go out. That's all I can say. What a way to just at the, and just, I mean, again, here you have this folk hero known all around, and all of a sudden you find out that he was killed by his own men.
Well, and so they
And I don't know if they kept that a secret.
they
for as long
tried
as
to
they
keep
could,
it a
but-
secret. And what Josh was saying before about like the forensics,
Yeah.
that was a really, really big thing that came out is, hold on a second. The thing that killed Jackson was a 67 millimeter bullet. That's what the South uses. That's not what the North uses, because there was some thought at the very beginning that, oh, well, maybe the North had a spy in there and shot him first and then everybody returned volley. That's how they tried to paint the picture. No, it was
I mean, that would be pretty cool. It's a pretty cool
all-
story if that's what it is. But
Major John D. Barry that was worried about the Yankees.
Now,
holy crap, shoot it.
this is my favorite part of the whole thing. His last final words. Are you ready for his final words? It was written down by a guy named Dr. McGuire, who was his assist or attendant at the time. This is what he recorded. A few moments before he died, he cried out in his delirium, "Order A.P. Hill to prepare for action. Pass the infantry to the front rapidly. Tell Major Hawks." Then stopped, leaving his sentence unfinished. Presently, a smile of ineffable sweetness spread itself over his pale face, and he said quietly with an expression as if of relief, "Let us cross over the river, and let us rest under the shade of the trees."
Oh, well, he was a super
Religious till
guy.
the very end.
Yeah, he was. I mean,
So he saw the light and said, "You know what? Enough military. Let's cross the river, and
I'm
let's
done
go
with
sit
this."
underneath the shade of the tree." And he died. Just like that. And it doesn't end there. Some believe that it was on purpose. There are conspiracy theories out there that killing Jackson would once again unite the South and make them fight even harder.
I've actually read those, and I mean, I don't know if they're modern day conspiracies or not, but there's a lot of people that say kind of what I was saying before, like the Union was getting smart to his tactics, and so the best thing for him and the South was if he was dead.
Yep.
So I tend to not believe it,
No.
just because the whole story of how he died is just so unceremonial. You know, killed by your own men because they were too worried about the Yankees. Having your right arm cut off, you know, the arm that you raised into the air. And there's just so many different things that are just so, it doesn't paint a hero's death.
Yep.
It paints it paints the picture of chaos, which I think at that point, the South was starting to suffer. They were starting to suffer this chaotic kind of thought of, oh, this is an unwinnable thing. So
now here's the interesting thing is his death was announced that he died because of the Battle of Chancellorsville, and was not found out that he was shot and killed by the Confederacies until after the war was over, and the Union soldiers found the
bullet.
Yep, the bullet and the medical review stating that he was killed by his own people. So the Unions thought that he was killed because he was injured in the battle and his arm had been amputated.
Well, can you imagine? Here you've had this battle, you're hanging out, it's nighttime, and all of a sudden the enemy just starts unloading their bullets, artillery, and it's like, it's not hitting us. What
are they shooting at?
Bigfoot! Oh my gosh.
So some final thoughts. I'm going to start. This is once again, and I'm going to say this again. It's not very fair to paint him as a weirdo, and even to make light of some of these ailments, because they point towards some kind of mental disorder. However, I do think it's very interesting that this general that we have literally been taught about our entire lives. I don't know about you guys, but Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee were the two generals I knew from the South, and
they were known back then as some of the greatest United States general, even though
and Grant and Sherman were the ones that I knew from North. Those were the four that I could tell you anytime from when I was in fourth grade and we first learned about it all the way up. Those were the generals of the Civil War, and to find out that this man was he had so much more idiosyncrasies and depths and kind of thing. It's just very fascinating to me. So I do want to end with one thing. The man loved lemons.
Did he like lemons?
He loved lemons to a point where Richard Taylor, the son of President Zachary Taylor, wrote a passage in his war memoirs about Jackson eating lemons, saying, "Where Jackson got his lemons, no fellow could find out, but he was rarely without one." The man just chewed on lemons all the time. He probably had...
When life gives you lemons.
When life gives you lemons, get shot by your own major.
And here's what I'll say, and this might get a little political, but it's sad that we live in a world where Confederate generals are now criticized at length, because these people were, fighting for their cause, and it's very interesting to learn what they did. Yes, what did they stand for? What was right? No.
Yeah, it was pretty awful.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible.
They were men. I'm never going to excuse the thought that
they were fighting for the wrong
side. They were
side.
fighting for an awful, awful ideology, a horrible, terrible thing, but that doesn't make their genius in the battlefield any less.
Exactly, and that's what I wanted to bring up. Is it's fun researching about Lee and Jackson, because they were brilliant on the military field, even if it was just Jackson standing on top of a hill, or Lee, running around like a crazy head with chicken with his head cut off.
Just trying to hold together something that, oh, bless him.
So, yeah, Jackson. What a guy.
All right, Jake, what's your final thoughts?
It's kind of interesting, because when you read into things like this, it's always fun. Because me, as Danny said, you are raised with it, and it was one of those things in school. It's like you're always raised learning about them, and they're cool, but they're on the wrong side. Right. And so I always had that in my mind. But it's interesting and kind of cool that you could see someone who really did have various ailments, various issues, but still was able to accomplish quite a bit. Probably didn't go out the way he wanted to, but maybe he wanted to. I don't know. It's one of those things, but it's kind of interesting that you can see, even with those things, there still was opportunity for success in their own regard. And I think even for people today, when you think, oh man, I can't do it because of this, it's one of those things where it's like, well, Stonewall Jackson became one of the head generals of the Confederate Army. I'm pretty sure you can do a pretty good job doing wherever you want to go.
Stonewall Jackson, a man who ate lemons nonstop, who raised his arm when he felt his left side was too heavy, a man who's in every conversation would bring up God to a point where it made even pastors uncomfortable. A man who would not change his clothes, who couldn't ride a horse, ended up being a revered general. Guess what? You can do whatever you want in your life.
You can accomplish great things.
Well, boys, welcome to the end. Thank you so much for listening to
Wait, I have
Twaddling.
one.
I'll give you time.
Jeez.
Thank you so much for listening to Twaddling Along. We are back with our 3. So next week, I believe it is paranormal. And Jake, I think it's you who's
Yes.
talking about paranormal.
I'm getting the feeling that we should talk about ye old Ireland and its different things with St. Patrick's Day.
Ooh.
So
Yes.
with especially I want to talk about Leprechaun really bad.
The Irish mythology. That does sound fun. So please join us for that. As always, make sure that you are subscribed to us. Check out our social medias. We are trying to be a little bit more involved there. Leave us comments. Leave us, if you have long form comments that you want to do, you can always email us at emails@twaddlingalong.com. Now, Josh had a couple last things you want to talk about. Go ahead, Josh.
His arm is a national monument. I'm just kidding. No, his arm was buried away from his body. In 1921, a Marine Commando General Smedley Butler was told by a farmer that his arm was buried nearby, and so they gave his arm a proper military burial.
So it has a tombstone and everything.
It was undug. He removed the arm from the metal or the wooden box, was given a metal box, and was buried with a Confederate flag.
Again, it's like you can look it up. It has its own tombstone.
Yep.
It's like here is to Stonewall Jackson's arm.
Yep.
It's kind of funny.
And it was known as until the tombstone was actually moved to a visitor center, it was the most visited plaque in that area of Virginia.
History is fun, kids. For everybody who's listening, you really should look into it because I can't state it enough. It is so interesting to come across these stories that you had no idea about, but from someone that, for all intents and purposes, you've known about your entire life.
Yep.
So,
Don't look into my history.
well, thank you so much, all. Have a wonderful week.
Hey, I did pretty stinking good with following you guys with history this time.
You did,
I
Jake.
deserve a cookie.
No comment.